Today, the tension is mounting around rare earth metals. It is escalating. China has been stepping up the pressure. It is cutting down exports of a critical resource, rare earth metals. That statement is not hyperbole. Rare earths have become linchpins of modern high-tech and defense, and China is asserting dominance over every leg of that chain. From semiconductors to smartphones, electric vehicles, and missile systems, rare earth components are foundational. China dominates the mining, refining, and magnet production stages. Now Beijing is throttling those channels. Now rare earths are used everywhere these days, from semiconductors to smartphones to EVs and even missile systems. Just ahead of renewed trade talks between President Xi and President Trump, China has rolled out fresh export controls. Today, China announced new export curves. It says it wants to block military use of rare earths, but these rules will affect global supply chains, especially for high-tech companies in the United States. These new policies do more than restrict raw materials. They seek to control the technologies, know-how, and talent behind them. China says that they will block the sharing of key technologies, and this includes anything which can help countries set up their own supply chain of rare earths. To Beijing, ensuring that no one else builds competing ecosystems is as important as controlling the mines themselves. The restrictions are sweeping. Factories are banned from exporting manufacturing equipment. Even technicians have been constrained, with some reportedly asked to relinquish passports to prevent overseas movement. Many of them were asked to surrender their passports. They cannot travel abroad. The logic is clear. China is locking down the entire rare earth ecosystem, from mining to technology to expertise. Nothing leaves the country. At the heart of this lie, materials like dysprosium, used in high-temperature electronics, of which China refines virtually the entire global supply. China refines 99% of the world's supply. There's just one major plant that does it, and that plant is in China. The dependence is near total, making other nations especially vulnerable. In effect, China dominates the global rare earth industry. It controls almost all stages of the supply chain. That control bestows strategic leverage. Pressures, disruptions, or embargoes become possible tools in geopolitical contests. The implications for the United States are profound. Tech giants such as Nvidia and Apple rely on rare earth imports. Under these tightened rules, they may need dual clearances, one from Washington and one from Beijing. China is applying a technique the US once used with semiconductors, turning essential components into bargaining chips. China is doing what the US did earlier with semiconductors. It is using rare earths the same way America used chips, as leverage and as control over supply chains. The intent is unmistakable: to counter US dominance and reshape leverage. In fact, Beijing has reached out to other nations to shut down alternative supply routes. Reports say that China made a direct request to New Delhi. It asked India not to divert any of its rare earth supply to the US. In short, China seeks to wall off competition. India is caught in this new geopolitical squeeze. Earlier in 2025, Indian manufacturers faced a de facto rare earth magnet embargo from China, forcing urgent introspection about domestic capabilities. Reports say that India is working on a new incentive scheme. The goal is to build rare earth magnet production at home. That plan has now been formalized. The government has approved a 7,300 crore rupee scheme to support local magnet manufacturing and reduce import dependence. These magnets are essential in electric motors and defense systems. India currently imports most of its requirement, but demand is projected to double by 2030 under the government's forecasts. To that end, India aims to produce about 6,000 tons annually, leveraging the incentive scheme to foster domestic industry and support startups. But China, wary of re-export to its global rivals, has made a condition. China wants to block alternate routes. It wants to make sure no one else fills the gap. And to ensure compliance, it's demanding India issue written assurances that magnets supplied will not be re-exported to the US. Whether India will accede is uncertain. Many analysts see this move as Beijing's attempt to exercise control over regional supply chains. What's unfolding is a gradual decoupling of global rare earth supply chains. Nations are scrambling to secure mineral independence, but rebalancing decades of dependence won't be fast. For now, China is one step ahead, and it is using rare earths as a strategic tool. The analogy is apt. Just as oil shaped geopolitics in the 20th century, semiconductors dominated the early 21st, and now magnets and rare earths are emerging as the new pivot. Like oil was used in the past, like semiconductors were used recently, now magnets and rare earths are the new leverage, and China is showing the world that it knows how to use them. Countries will respond. The United States is accelerating domestic rare earth initiatives. India is pushing to scale local magnet manufacturing, and European firms are exploring alternative sources and arms of supply chain reshuffling. Yet for the moment, China maintains the advantage, control over not just materials, but the very pathways of innovation, assembly, and distribution. This is no ordinary trade spat. Rare earth elements have dual-use capabilities. They are integral to consumer electronics, clean energy technology, and vital military hardware like radar, guidance systems, and countermeasures. When China blocks not just raw exports, but the export of processing technologies and talent, it is weaponizing its comparative advantage. The new rules restrict anything which can help countries set up their own supply chain of rare earths. And the nature of this crackdown is sweeping. Global supply chains, particularly in high tech, are delicately balanced. Delays, licensing rejections, or shifts in policy can cascade. Already, EU firms are bracing for shutdowns. Automakers in Europe are suspending production amid shortages. Some component lines have halted altogether. The demand-side pressure is mounting as more nations seek autonomy in critical minerals. Competition intensifies. But building processing capacity, particularly for heavier rare earths, is technically and capital intensive. It requires not just mining, but refining, separation, magnet production, recycling, and technical expertise. Hence China's strategy. Rather than rushing to build overcapacity, it is entrenching its dominance by raising barriers to entry across all levels. The Xi-Trump summit will be a test. Whether the US can force concessions on rare earth licensing and exports. The US is expected to respond with incentives, possibly tariffs or restrictions of its own, or coordinated efforts with allied nations to build alternative supply chains. India's scheme may stimulate more local capacity, but scaling to 6,000 tons annually will require sustained investment and regulatory backing. European and allied firms will intensify efforts to diversify procurement, invest in alternative sources, or push for policy support. The structural dominance China is consolidating may persist unless challenged with equally bold industrial strategies. In effect, a new chapter in the global technology competition is emerging, one where rare earths and magnets become not just components, but strategic weapons in geopolitical rivalry.